The first thing Abigail knew was the taste of salt and copper, and the deafening, world-ending roar of the sea trying to claim her. Her body was a map of pain, each ache a coordinate marking her passage from the luxury yacht's polished deck to this unforgiving shore. She was tangled in the skeletal roots of a fallen tree, the surf clawing at her legs, trying to drag her back into the dark. A fresh wave crashed over her head, and she sputtered, fighting the pull. Move. You have to move. The command came from a deep, primal place, a place that knew if she stayed here, she and the tiny life inside her would be gone. Grunting with effort, she hauled herself up the rocky incline, her designer dress, now a torn, sodden rag, snagging on every sharp edge. The storm had passed, leaving behind a bruised, pre-dawn sky and a beach littered with debris. A champagne bottle, a shredded life preserver with the yacht's name, the siren's call barely legible. No other people, just the rhythmic, taunting shush of the retreating waves. Hello, her voice was a raw scrape against the silence. Is anyone there? Only the wind answered, whistling through the dense, unfamiliar jungle that crowded the beach. Panic, cold and slick, began to coil in her stomach. She was 7 months pregnant. She was alone. And she realized with a dawning horror, completely and utterly stranded. Her name was Abigail Reed. She'd been on that yacht because of Evan, always because of Evan. A reconciliation trip, he'd called it. A last-ditch effort to save their marriage before the baby came. She'd been a fool to believe him. The last thing she remembered before the world tilted was his face, not panicked, but calculating, as the storm hit and the lights failed. A sharp crack from the tree line snapped her head up. Not wind, too deliberate. "Stay back!" she shouted, scrambling to her feet, her hands instinctively cradling her swollen belly. "I'm warning you." The figure that emerged from the shadows was not Evan. It was a man, but he moved with a predator's silent grace that made the warning die in her throat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing only torn cargo pants, his torso a canvas of old scars and taut muscle. His hair was dark, wild, and his eyes, even from 20 feet away, she could see they were an unnerving, pale gold, fixed on her with an intensity that felt less like sight and more like being physically touched. "You're from the boat." His voice was a low rumble, gravelly from disuse, but it carried effortlessly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, there was a storm, my husband," Abigail's words tumbled out. "Are you with the Coast Guard, search and rescue?" A humorless, almost feral smile touched his lips. "No." He took a step closer, and Abigail took an involuntary step back, her heels sinking into wet sand. He stopped immediately, his head tilting like a wolf catching a scent. His nostrils flared. A strange, electric tension crackled in the air between them, a push-pull of fear and something else, something dangerously magnetic. Little did she know, that single breath he took had just rewritten her destiny. "You're hurt," he stated, his gaze dropping to the cut on her forehead, then lower to the protective curve of her hands over her stomach. His golden eyes widened a fraction. A complex series of emotions flashed through them. Shock, confusion, and a sudden, fierce protectiveness that seemed to shake him. He took a deliberate step back, as if the air around her had burned him. "I'm fine," Abigail lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Who are you? What is this place?" "My name is Bradley." He didn't offer a last name. "And this island is private. You shouldn't be here." His voice held a note of genuine warning, but it was undercut by the way his eyes kept returning to her, tracing her form with a bewildered, almost pained recognition. "Believe me, I don't want to be here," she shot back, a spark of her old defiance cutting through the fear. "I need to contact the mainland. A radio, a satellite phone, anything." Bradley's jaw tightened. "There's nothing like that here. That's impossible. Everyone has something." Not here. The finality in his tone was absolute. He looked past her, out to the wreck-strewn sea, his expression hardening. Were you alone on the boat? The question was too specific. Abigail's guard, honed by years with Evan, slammed up. Why? Because if you weren't, they might be out there. Or they might already be here. His golden eyes scanned the tree line, and for the first time, Abigail saw it, not just vigilance, but the hyper-alertness of a creature expecting an attack. That was my first mistake, not understanding what he was looking for. It's not safe on the beach. Come with me. I'm not going anywhere with you. The words were brave, but her body betrayed her, shivering violently in the damp dawn air. Bradley let out a low sound, almost a growl of frustration. You're carrying a child. You're exposed, injured, and in shock. The temperature will drop. Predators hunt at dawn. He said the last word with a weight that implied more than just animals. My camp is secure. You can rest there. Decide your next move when you're not about to collapse. Every instinct screamed against following this wild, dangerous-looking stranger into an unknown jungle. But her other instincts, the deeper, maternal ones, calculated the odds. The exposed beach versus possible shelter. The unknown versus the certain failure of her own strength. The baby kicked, a firm reminder of its presence, its need. If you try anything, she began. You'll what? He interrupted, but there was no malice in it. Only a stark, weary honesty. You have no weapons. You can barely stand. If I wanted to harm you, Abigail, I would have already done it. The use of her name, which she hadn't given him, stole the breath from her lungs. How do you know my name? He blinked as if surprised he'd said it. Your bracelet, he said roughly, nodding at her wrist. She looked down. Her platinum ID bracelet, a gift from Evan she'd worn out of habit, glinted in the weak light. It was engraved. Abigail. She'd forgotten it was there. The explanation was logical, simple. So why did she feel like he'd known it, known her, long before he saw the medal? With no other choice, she gave a single, stiff nod. He didn't offer a hand. He simply turned and moved into the foliage, expecting her to follow. His path was not a trail, but he moved through the dense undergrowth with an uncanny, silent ease, holding vines and branches aside for her. The jungle was a symphony of strange sounds, chittering birds, the rustle of unseen things, the drip of residual rain from broad leaves. It was a stark contrast to the roaring silence of the beach. After 20 minutes of arduous walking, her body screaming in protest, they entered a small, hidden clearing. A sturdy linta was built against a rock face, camouflaged with living vines. A cold fire pit sat in the center. It was primitive, but it was clearly a place of long-term habitation. Not a castaway's desperate shelter, but a den. Sit, Bradley commanded, gesturing to a pile of furs inside the lean-to. I'll get water. While he was gone, Abigail examined the space. It was clean, orderly. A few crude tools. A stack of books, of all things, their spines cracked and weathered. And a smell not unpleasant but distinct. Like ozone after a storm, pine, and wild earth. It was the smell that clung to Bradley. He returned with a hollowed-out gourd full of fresh water. She drank greedily, the coolness a balm. He watched her, his gaze unnervingly focused. Your husband, Evan, what does he look like? The question, coming from him in this context, felt like a trap. Why does that matter? Because men from boats like yours don't end up in places like this by accident, Bradley said, his voice dropping. And if he's here, he'll be looking for you. I need to know if the man I might smell is a threat. Smell. He's about your height, blonde hair, blue eyes, he'd be well-dressed. Even now, she couldn't imagine Evan without his armor of tailored suits. Bradley's expression darkened. Arrogant walk, like the ground owes him something. The accuracy was chilling. Yes. A low, genuine growl vibrated in Bradley's chest. The The sound was not human. It was a sound from the deep woods, from the throat of something wild. Abigail froze, the gourd halfway to her lips. Before she could react, a new voice cut through the clearing, high with panic. "Bradley, Alpha." A young man, perhaps 19, burst into the clearing. He was lean, with fiery red hair and frantic green eyes, Finn. He skidded to a halt, his eyes darting to Abigail in shock and something like fear. "You found her. The human from the storm." "Report, Finn," Bradley said, his voice shifting into an authority that was absolute, natural. The growl was gone, replaced by a commander's calm. "Nina's back from the northern ridge. She caught a scent. Rogue, strong, fresh, it's circling." Finn's words tumbled out. "And it's not just any rogue. Nina says it smells like pack, but wrong, sick." Bradley went very still. The air around him seemed to thicken. "Direction? East, moving west, toward..." Finn's eyes flicked to Abigail again, full of dread. "Toward the beach where she washed up." The pieces, terrible and sharp, began to click together in Abigail's mind. The calculated look on Evan's face. The strangely targeted violence of the storm. Bradley's talk of predators and threats. A rogue. Circling. Smelling of pack but wrong. Bradley turned those molten gold eyes on her. The protectiveness she'd seen earlier was now a blazing, undeniable force. "Did your husband ever get sick, Abigail? Especially after disagreements? Did he ever have fits of rage that seemed unnatural? Did he ever talk about family legacies? About things that howl at the moon?" Each question was a hammer blow. Memories assaulted her. Evan's migraines that left him feverish and snarling. The time he'd put his fist through a solid oak door during an argument. His cryptic, drunken ramblings about the old blood and his rightful place. She'd chalked it up to temper and old money eccentricity. Now, faced with this wild man in this wild place, those excuses crumbled to dust. "What are you?" she whispered, her blood running cold. Bradley didn't answer directly. He stepped closer, and the compulsion to reach for him, to let his impossible strength shield her, warred with the terror. "The man you married, Evan, is not what he seems. He is a shifter, a werewolf. And from the scent Nina caught, he has broken with his pack. He is rogue, and he is here." The world tilted again. It was madness, a fairy tale monster. But it explained everything, the unnatural fear she'd carried, the sense of being prey in her own home, Bradley's own uncanny presence. "Why?" she breathed. "Why would he come here? Why strand me?" "Because of what you carry," Bradley said, his gaze dropping to her belly, his voice filled with a awe and a terrible gravity. "A pregnant human female, especially one who is..." He stopped himself, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "To a rogue, you are a prize, a tool, a way to forge a new pack or to bargain for re-entry to an old one. He didn't lose you in the storm, Abigail. He delivered you. To an island he knew was my territory." The revelation was a physical blow. Evan had thrown her to the wolves. Literally. A long, mournful howl ripped through the jungle, far too close. It was not the sound of an animal. It was layered with intelligence, with malice, and with a haunting, familiar note that iced her veins. Evan. Bradley's head snapped up. His body tensed, a coil of pure, lethal energy. In that moment, he shed the last vestige of civilized man. He was all predator, all alpha. "Finn, get her to the high cave. Guard her with your life. You do not engage, you understand. You run." "Bradley, you can't face a rogue alone, not in your condition," Finn protested. "My condition is why I must," Bradley shot back, and for a fleeting second, his eyes flashed brighter, the gold bleeding into the iris. He looked at Abigail, and his voice softened into a raw, possessive command that vibrated in her very bones. "Stay with Finn. Do not come out no matter what you hear." Another howl, closer now, echoed through the trees. It was answered by a different one, a fierce, challenging snarl that came from Bradley's throat. He began to pull at the fastening of his pants. "What are you doing?" Abigail cried, horror-stricken. "What I must," he growled, his words beginning to slur, his bones emitting a sickening, muffled crack. "To protect what's mine." The last word was a guttural, inhuman sound. His body shuddered, muscles writhing and expanding beneath his skin. The air shimmered around him with a terrifying heat. Finn grabbed Abigail's arm, pulling her back, his face pale with fear and reverence. As Bradley dropped to all fours with a roar of agony and ecstasy, his spine elongating, dark fur erupting from tearing flesh, Abigail understood two things with absolute, soul-shaking clarity. The father of her child was a monster who had sent her into a trap, and the terrifying, magnificent beast now emerging from a whirlwind of pain and transformation, the true alpha, was the only thing standing between them and a fate worse than death. What happened next, as the dawn broke and two wolves faced each other over the claim of her and her unborn child, would change everything. The word hung in the humid air between them. Rogue. It explained the chilling wrongness in Evan's smile, the calculated cruelty of the wreck, but it opened a chasm of new, impossible terror. Werewolf. Bradley was a werewolf. The world tilted, the jungle sounds swelling into a deafening roar. "You're lying," Abigail whispered, her hand instinctively cradling her belly. That's not real." Bradley didn't flinch. His golden eyes held hers, not with menace, but with a weary, brutal truth. "The scent on the wind, the strength you felt when I carried you, the way your husband moves like a ghost through terrain that would break a man. You feel the truth in your bones, Abigail. You just refuse to name it." A twig snapped in the jungle, sharp as a gunshot. Both their heads whipped toward the sound. The fire popped, sending a spiral of embers upward. "He's closer," Bradley growled, the sound low and visceral. He stood in one fluid motion, his head lifted, nostrils flaring. "The wind shifted. He's testing the perimeter." Finn materialized from the shadows beside the lean-to, his young face tense. "Alpha, the scent is stronger on the eastern ridge. He's not running, he's pacing." "He's waiting for something," Bradley said, his eyes never leaving the dark tree line. "The moon, or for me to make a mistake." He looked down at Abigail, his expression hardening into a command. "You cannot stay here. The camp is exposed. Finn will take you to the high cave. Now." "I'm not going deeper into the jungle with—" Abigail's protest died in her throat. "With another one of you." The words wouldn't form. Her mind was a fractured pane of glass, each piece reflecting a different horror. Evan's face as he locked her stateroom door, Bradley's impossible speed, the feral glow in their eyes. "Finn is pack," Bradley stated, as if that explained everything. He knelt before her, and despite her fear, his proximity was a strange anchor. "He is bound by my will. Your safety is my will. The cave is secure. It has one entrance, it's easily defended, and it is unknown to the rogue. You will be safe there until I deal with this." "Deal with this," she echoed, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "You mean kill my husband, the father of my child." "I mean remove the threat to what is mine," he corrected, his voice dropping into a register that vibrated through the ground. The possessiveness wasn't romantic. It was primal, territorial. It should have repulsed her. Instead, a treacherous part of her, the part that had been adrift and terrified for hours, clung to it. He saw her, and the life inside her, as something to be protected at all costs. Evan saw them as a tool. "Please, Abigail," Finn said, his voice surprisingly gentle. He offered a hand not to pull her up, but in hesitant supplication. The alpha's condition, he shouldn't have to worry about the den while he hunts. Condition, the word from the beach resurfaced. She looked at Bradley more closely. In the flickering firelight, she saw it now. A fine tremor in the hand braced on his knee, a sheen of sweat on his temple not wholly due to the heat. He was holding himself together with sheer will. "What's wrong with you?" she asked softly. He bared his teeth in something that wasn't a smile. "The moon is a weight. It pulls. Tonight it pulls harder. It is inconvenient." He surged to his feet, swaying for a single, alarming second before his stance solidified. "Go." Now, another sound cut the night, not a snap, but a long, deliberate scrape against rock. It came from the east, where the ridge overlooked the camp. It was a taunt. Bradley's head jerked up. A rumble started deep in his chest, a sound that belonged to no human throat. "He's here." What happened next changed everything. It wasn't an attack, it was a performance. Evan's voice floated down from the darkness, smooth, cultured, and utterly out of place in the primal jungle. "Abigail, sweetheart, I know you can hear me." Her blood turned to ice. It was the voice from her nightmares, from the last moment on the ship's deck, whispering false assurances. "Don't answer," Bradley breathed, his body coiled like a spring. "I just want to talk," Evan called, his tone reasonable, sane. "I see you've fallen in with the locals, but you don't understand their rules, my love, their primitive laws. That alpha of theirs, he's sick, Abigail, unstable. My old pack had files on him, a moon sickness that makes him volatile. You think he's protecting you? He's collecting you, for his pack. Your child, our child, will be born into a cage." Every word was a poison dart, aimed with cruel precision. They fed her deepest fears, giving voice to the doubts she'd been too terrified to articulate. She looked at Bradley's trembling form, the animalistic rage contorting his features. "He's lying," Finn hissed, his own hands curled into claws. "Alpha would never. The child of a rogue and a human," Evan continued, his voice moving, circling along the ridge. "A half-breed with no allegiance. Do you think any pack will let it live? Bradley's pack will take it, yes, to control it, or to eliminate it. I am its father. I am the only one who can guarantee its future, its power. Come to the sound of my voice, Abigail. I can get us off this rock, back to the world. The world, doctors, safety, a nursery." It was a siren's call weaving through the trees. Her body ached for it. Bradley turned to her. The rage was gone, replaced by a stark, desperate intensity. "He is using the truth to build a lie. Yes, my blood is heavy tonight. Yes, your child's nature will make it a target. But his solution is slavery. Mine is sanctuary. You must choose. Now, trust the beast you see or the beast who hides in pretty words." The consequence of her choice hung in the balance. A new question screamed in her mind. Who was the greater monster? A low, pained groan escaped Bradley. He doubled over, one hand clawing at the earth. His knuckles whitened, the bones seeming to shift and press against the skin. "Alpha," Finn cried, stepping forward. "No," Bradley snarled, the word mangled. "Take her, go the path behind the waterfall, now, Finn." The scraping sound from the ridge became a clatter of pebbles. Evan was descending. Finn didn't hesitate. He moved to Abigail, his touch firm but not harsh. "We have to run. Please." The sight of Bradley in clear, agonizing distress, fighting for control, decided her. The elegant monster in the dark or the suffering one before her? She chose the one who had shown her his weakness. She let Finn pull her up. "Bradley," she stammered. "Go," he roared, and the human voice was almost entirely gone. Finn pulled her into the jungle at a punishing pace. Thorns snatched at her clothes, vines tried to trip her. The sounds of the camp faded, replaced by the roar of water. A fine mist coated her skin. They burst into a clearing where a narrow waterfall cascaded down a mossy rock face. "Here," Finn urged, pulling her behind the curtain of water. A hidden crevice, slick and dark, opened in the rock. Inside, Keep your hand on the wall, it slopes up. The cave mouth swallowed them, the thunder of the waterfall muting to a dull rumble. The air was cool and damp. Finn, ahead of her, seemed to see in the near-total darkness. After a tense, groping climb, the passage opened into a wider chamber. A faint, phosphorescent glow from lichen on the walls revealed a space about the size of a living room, with a sandy floor and a high ceiling. Abigail sank to the ground, her breath sobbing in her lungs. The baby kicked, a frantic flutter of protest. She hugged herself, shaking. Finn stood guard at the chamber entrance, his posture alert. For long minutes, there was only the distant water and the sound of their breathing. Then, a howl tore through the night. It wasn't Bradley's. It was higher, more piercing, and laced with a terrifying triumph. It was answered instantly by a deeper, anguished roar of pure fury that shook dust from the cave ceiling. The hunt was on. "He's drawn him away," Finn whispered, relief and fear warring in his voice. "The alpha took the bait." "Bait," Abigail croaked. "Evan's taunts. He's leading him on a chase away from us. It's what he wanted, to separate the alpha from his den." Finn's young face was grim. "But he doesn't know the island like we do. And he doesn't know how Bradley fights when the moon is on him." The sounds of the chase faded into the distance. An eerie silence settled over the cave, broken only by the drip of water. "Tell me," Abigail said, her voice hollow. "Tell me everything, about this condition, about what Evan wants with my baby." Finn glanced at her, conflicted. "It's not my place. It is exactly your place," she snapped, the fear sharpening into anger. "My life, my child's life, is at the center of this. I am done with mysteries." Finn flinched, then nodded slowly. He settled against the wall, keeping his ears pricked. "The moon's sickness, it's rare. It means the pull to shift is constant, painful. Most alphas with it don't survive long. They lose control, go feral. But Bradley, he's stronger. He holds it back mostly. But on nights when the moon is full and close, like tonight, the weight is almost too much. His senses are sharper, but his temper is thin. It makes him unpredictable, dangerous to friends and foes alike." Abigail absorbed this. The trembling, the sweat, the superhuman effort for control. "And my child." Finn looked at her belly with a mix of awe and pity. "A child of a werewolf, even a rogue, carries the potential. It's in the blood. For a pack, a new child is everything. But a rogue's child, its allegiance is unclear. Some packs would kill it to avoid future conflict. Others would try to raise it to bind it to them. Evan's old pack, they were purists. They'd see it as contaminated. But Evan, if he gets the child, he could use it as a bargaining chip, a claim to power. Or," Finn's voice dropped, "there are darker rituals, legacies from the old times. A pup's life force, especially an unborn one with a human mother, is said to be potent. It could be used to break a curse, or to steal strength." A cold deeper than the cave seeped into Abigail's soul. She wasn't just a vessel to Evan. She was a ritual sacrifice. Their child was a component. "And Bradley?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. "What does he want with it?" Finn met her gaze squarely. "The alpha doesn't see an it. He sees a pup, his to protect. The instinct, it's overwhelming for an alpha, especially one without pups of his own. When he found you on the beach, he didn't just see a human. He saw a den mother in danger. His wolf claimed you in that moment. To him, you are pack. The pup is pack. It's that simple." Simple, it was monstrously complex, yet on a visceral level she understood that simplicity. Bradley's actions had been consistent from the first moment. Shelter, safety, defense. A new sound filtered into the cave. Not a howl, a whimper. Animal, pained, and getting closer. Finn was on his feet in an instant, his body blocking the entrance to the chamber. "Stay back," he ordered. The scrabbling of claws on stone echoed up the passage. A shadow, large and low, filled the tunnel entrance. Bradley staggered into the chamber, but it was not the Bradley from the camp. He was caught in a horrific middle ground. His body was hunched, muscles corded and distorted beneath torn clothing. His face was elongated, a muzzle struggling to form, his jaw distended with vicious, gleaming fangs. His hands were twisted paws, tipped with black claws that scored the stone floor. His eyes blazed with that same golden fire, but they were wild, swimming with pain and barely contained fury. He bled from a deep gash across his shoulder. He saw Abigail, and a shudder racked his half-changed form. A low, pained whine escaped him. "Alpha," Finn said, his voice trembling with a mix of reverence and terror. "You're hurt. Did you get him?" Bradley shook his massive, misshapen head. A human gesture, grotesque on the beastly form. He tried to speak, but only a guttural rasp came out. "Trap! It was a trap." He took a step toward Abigail, then collapsed onto the sandy floor. The transformation seemed to recede slightly, the wolfish features melting back toward human, leaving him gaunt, bleeding, and utterly exhausted. The human mind was back in the driver's seat, but the vehicle was shattered. "He led me to the southern bluffs," Bradley gasped, his voice raw. "Another rogue was waiting, not from his old pack, a mercenary, they work in pairs." He coughed, a wet, painful sound. "Evan never wanted a fight, he wanted me gone. While I was occupied." His golden eyes, full of agony and a dawning, horrific realization, locked onto Abigail. "He's coming here. He knew about the cave. Nina's scent is on the wind, she's down. He got the information from her." Finn let out a strangled cry. "Nina!" The revelation was a physical blow. Evan's pretty words on the ridge were just noise. This was his plan: divide, misdirect, and strike at the heart of the den when it was undefended. Bradley tried to push himself up, but his arms gave way. The moon's sickness and his wounds had drained him. He was helpless. From the passage below, a new scent wafted up: copper, salt, and that same wrong, sickly sweet smell of rogue. Then, a familiar, calm footfall on the stone. Evan's silhouette appeared at the chamber entrance, perfectly human, impeccably dressed in clothes that were only slightly rumpled. He held a heavy, silver-coated knife loosely in one hand. His smile was warm, charming, and utterly terrifying. "There you are, my darlings," he said, his eyes sweeping over the crippled Alpha, the terrified young wolf, and finally, resting on his pregnant wife. Family reunion. If only I had known the depth of his deception. If only I had understood that the real monster wasn't the one who looked the part, but the one who wore the face of a man I once loved. Evan took a step into the chamber, the silver knife catching the faint lichen light. "Now," he said pleasantly, his gaze fixed on Abigail's swollen belly. "Let's talk about our future." The silver knife in Evan's hand glinted in the cave's eerie, phosphorescent light. He stood in the crevice entrance, a dark silhouette against the roaring white curtain of the waterfall, blocking their only escape. Abigail's breath hitched, her back pressing against the cold cave wall. Bradley, caught between forms and bleeding from the deep gash on his shoulder, let out a low, pained growl that was more despair than threat. Finn shifted in front of them both, a young wolf baring his teeth at a seasoned killer. "Step aside, pup," Evan said, his voice calm, conversational, as if asking for the salt. "This doesn't have to be your end. My business is with my wife and that thing she's protecting." The word thing struck Abigail like a physical blow. Her hands flew to her swollen belly. "Our child," she thought, a surge of defiant fury cutting through the terror. He called our child a thing. "You don't touch her," Bradley gritted out. The words were mangled, his jaw not quite human, not quite wolf. He tried to push himself up from where he'd collapsed, but his wounded leg buckled. The silver, Abigail realized. The wound from the knife wasn't closing. It wept a dark, sluggish blood that smelled wrong, like burnt metal in sickness. Still playing the noble alpha, Bradley. Evan took a step into the chamber, his boots scraping on the wet stone. The sound was deliberate, a taunt. Even now, moon-sick and silver-weakened, you can't even stand. Your pack is scattered, your scout is broken, and your territory is mine. All that's left is the prize. Finn snarled, the sound echoing off the cavern walls. The alpha is not fallen. He's falling right before your eyes, Evan smiled. It was the same charming, crooked smile that had once made Abigail's heart flutter. Now it was a gash of cruelty. Abigail, my love, look at him. Is this the protector you chose? A broken animal, hiding in a hole. Action, Evan moved, but not toward her. He feinted left, then lunged at Finn with terrifying speed. It wasn't a killing blow, it was a lesson. The silver knife flashed. Finn yelped, a line of red opening across his forearm. He stumbled back, more from shock than the injury itself. The scent of scorched fur joined the metallic tang of Bradley's blood. Reaction. Stop it! Abigail screamed, the sound swallowed by the waterfall's roar. She stepped away from the wall, putting herself between Evan and the wounded Bradley. You want me? Here I am. Just stop hurting them. Bradley's hand, clawed and trembling, grabbed the hem of her torn dress. No, he rasped. Mine to protect, mine. Evan's eyes flickered, the amber in them deepening with a possessive rage at Bradley's claim. You see, he said to Abigail, his voice dropping to an intimate, poisonous whisper. It's not about you, it's about possession, about territory. He's no better than I am. He just found you first. Consequence. You orchestrated a shipwreck, Abigail spat, her voice shaking with a fury she didn't know she possessed. You left me to drown with our baby. He pulled me from the water. He gave me shelter. So tell me, Evan, which one of you is the monster? For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. She saw not her husband, but something feral and furious, offended to its core. I am securing a legacy, he roared, the sound bouncing, multiplying in the chamber. A child of my blood, born on sacred ground, under the right moon. It is a key, Abigail. A key to power my former pack denied me. With it, I can claim an alpha's seat that is rightfully mine. I can rule more than this pathetic rock. New question. The revelation hung in the damp air. It wasn't just about cruelty or possession. It was ritual, it was calculation. Her pregnancy, the location, the timing, all of it was part of a plan. If only I had known the life inside me was a commodity to be traded for power. Bradley struggled again to rise, a new understanding dawning in his pain-clouded eyes. The blooded moon prophecy, he growled. Your pack's foolish legend. You think to use an innocent to make yourself an alpha prime. It's not a legend, Evan hissed. It's a law of nature. And you primitive guardian, you're sitting on the altar. This island, this cave, the energy here is perfect. All I need is the vessel and the moon, which rises tonight. The waterfall's roar was the only sound for a long moment. Abigail's mind raced, pieces clicking into a horrifying mosaic. The private cruise Evan had insisted on. The sudden storm. His absence from their cabin just before the ship struck the rocks. He hadn't just stranded her. He had delivered her. Action, Evan's patience snapped. He moved toward Abigail, ignoring Finn's defensive posture. Bradley, with a final, shuddering effort, forced his transformation. It was a horrific, incomplete process. Bones cracked and reset incorrectly, fur patchy, his human eyes staring out from a distorted wolfish face. He wasn't a warrior. He was a shield. He threw his body in front of Abigail just as Evan thrust the silver knife. Reaction. The blade sank into Bradley's already wounded shoulder. He didn't cry out. A deep, seismic shudder racked his form. His amber eyes met Abigail's, and in them she saw not pain but a fierce, unyielding command. Run. But there was nowhere to run. Evan wrenched the knife free. Bradley collapsed, his massive form shrinking, reverting to a naked, bleeding man, unconscious on the cave floor. Bradley! Abigail fell to her knees beside him, her hands fluttering over the terrible wound. His skin was cold. Finn launched himself at Evan in a blind rage. Evan, expecting it, sidestepped and brought the pommel of the knife down on the back of Finn's head with a sickening thwack. The young wolf crumpled, silent and still. Consequence. Now it was just her, and him. Evan wiped the silver blade clean on his pants, sighing as if mildly inconvenienced. Dramatics! Always so much drama. He knelt in front of her, ignoring the man dying at her side. He reached out and cupped her cheek. She flinched but didn't pull away. His touch was warm, familiar. It made her want to vomit. "It doesn't have to be painful, Abby," he murmured, his thumb stroking her skin. "The birth will be swift, the rituals are simple, and our child will usher in a new age. You should be proud. You're providing a king his crown." "You're insane," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "I'm ambitious. There's a difference." He stood, pulling her up with him. His grip on her arm was iron. "Now we're going to a more suitable place. The moon will be visible from the cliff top. The mercenary is preparing the space." New question. He began to drag her toward the entrance. Abigail dug in her heels, scrambling, looking back at Bradley's motionless form. Was he dead? Had her choice to trust him doomed them all? The sound that stopped Evan wasn't a growl. It was a voice, weak, ragged, but utterly clear. "You forget the law, rogue." Evan froze, turning slowly. Bradley was conscious, his eyes two slits of burning amber in his pale face. He was propped on one elbow, every word in agony. "The claim is contested." Evan laughed, a short, sharp bark. "By who, you? You can't even stand." "Not by me." Bradley's gaze shifted past Evan to the waterfall. "By the pack." Action. From behind the roaring curtain of water, shadows detached themselves from the jungle. They slipped through the crevice, silent as mist. 5 of them. 6. Their eyes glowed in the dim light, amber, gold, green. They were in human form, but their presence was purely predatory. They fanned out, blocking the exit, surrounding Evan. An older man with a scar across his throat stepped forward, his eyes on his fallen alpha. A deep, grieving rage tightened his features. "You trespass. You harm our scouts. You spill our alpha's blood." His voice was gravel. "You are packless. You have no rights here." Reaction. Evan shoved Abigail behind him, his knife coming up. For the first time, Abigail saw a crack in his arrogant calm. This wasn't part of his plan. He'd expected a weakened alpha and a pup, not the full, summoned might of Bradley's pack. "She is mine," Evan snarled, but it sounded like a plea now. "By human law and blood right." "Your human laws are sand," the scarred man said. "Here, pack law rules, and our alpha has claimed the female and her cub as under his protection. You challenge that claim, we answer." Consequence. The pack members began to shift. It was not the tortured, sickly transformation Bradley had endured. It was fluid, powerful, a symphony of cracking bones and expanding muscle. Within seconds, 6 massive wolves stood in the cave, their lips peeled back from teeth like ivory daggers. The low, unified rumble of their growls vibrated in Abigail's chest. Evan was outnumbered, cornered, but he still had the silver knife, and he still had Abigail. He wrapped an arm around her throat, pulling her tight against his chest, the knife point hovering over the swell of her belly. "Then nobody gets the prize," he yelled, spittle flying. "I'll spill the key right here on your cave floor." The wolves froze. The scarred man, now a grizzled gray wolf, snarled in frustration. New question. A standoff. The roar of the waterfall was the drumbeat to their stalemate. Abigail could feel Evan's heart hammering against her back. She could smell his fear, sour and sharp. The silver point pricked through her dress, a tiny, terrifying pinprick of cold against her skin. What happened next changed everything. Bradley spoke again. He had dragged himself to a sitting position against the wall, his breath a wet rasp. "Let her go, Evan. Take me, my life for theirs. An alpha's life, surely that's a worthy trade for your mercenary ally. More blood for your dark moon ritual." Evan's grip tightened. "You're already dead." "Am I?" Bradley's smile was a bloody grimace. "An alpha's voluntary sacrifice, given on the sacred ground you crave, wouldn't that power your prophecy more than a stolen babe's first breath?" Abigail saw the calculation in Evan's eyes. Greed warring with survival. The pack wolves watched, every muscle coiled. "How?" Evan demanded. "You release her to my pack. You and I walk out together. Your mercenary can have me. Do what you will. The claim on her ends with me." "No," the word was torn from Abigail. She couldn't mean this much. Not this man's life. Bradley's eyes found hers. The connection was a physical tether. Trust me, his gaze screamed. This is the only way. "Swear it," Evan said, hungry now. "Swear on your pack's soul." "I swear," Bradley said, the words a solemn vow. "On my pack and on the moon that made me, her safety for my life." Action. Evan hesitated for one more eternal second. Then he slowly loosened his arm from Abigail's throat. He gave her a hard shove toward the gray wolf. "Take her." Abigail stumbled forward, and the gray wolf nudged her gently behind the wall of fur and fangs, putting his body between her and Evan. She watched, her heart shattering as Bradley, using the cave wall, somehow impossibly got to his feet. He stood swaying, a monument of pain and defiance. "Finn," Bradley croaked, not taking his eyes off Evan. "See to Finn." Two wolves shifted back to human form, rushing to the unconscious young scout. "Now," Bradley said, taking a limping step toward Evan. "We go." Evan kept the knife pointed at Bradley, a cruel smile returning to his lips. "After you, Alpha." Bradley began to walk, stumbling toward the waterfall entrance. Evan followed, staying close, the knife ready. The pack wolves growled, edging forward, but the scarred gray wolf held them back with a sharp glance. A vow was a vow. Abigail watched them disappear through the crevice, the white water swallowing them whole. The sound of the waterfall, which had been a constant roar, suddenly felt like a scream. Reaction. The moment they were gone, the cave erupted into motion. The scarred man, the gray wolf, shifted back. "Liam, Mara, get the Alpha's female to the deepest part of the cave. Guard her with your lives. The rest, with me, we follow." The vow was his life, not that we let the rogue leave our island. Consequence. Two younger pack members, a man and a woman, came to Abigail's side. Their touches were firm but not unkind. "Come," the woman, Mara, said. "You're safe now." "He's not," Abigail cried, resisting. "Bradley, he's giving himself up. We have to stop them." "Our Alpha has made a tactical sacrifice," Liam said, his voice hard. "To protect the pack's future, we will not waste it. We will hunt, but you must be secure." They pulled her gently, but insistently deeper into the cavern, away from the entrance, into a narrower tunnel where the phosphorescent lichen gave way to darkness. The sounds of the pack rushing out into the jungle faded, replaced by the drip of water and her own ragged sobs. New question. In the dark, huddled on a cold stone shelf, with Mara and Liam as silent, vigilant statues at the tunnel mouth, Abigail finally broke. She cried for the wreckage of her marriage, for the terror, for the brave, broken man who had just traded his life for hers. She felt a sharp kick in her womb, a frantic, fluttering protest. Mara's head tilted. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, widened. "The cub, it's distressed." It's all the stress, the fear, Abigail gasped, clutching her belly. No, Myra whispered, moving closer, her nostrils flaring. It's the moon, it's rising, and the child, it feels the pull. She looked at Abigail, a dawning, awful awe in her expression. The rogue's prophecy, it's not about blood alone. It's about birth under the moon on this land. The ritual has already begun. You're going into labor. The pain was a wave, crashing over the jagged rocks of her terror. It crested, a deep, grinding contraction that stole her breath and vision, then receded, leaving her shivering in the dark. Labor. The word echoed in the hollow space Bradley had left behind. The moon was rising, and Evan was getting everything he wanted. Easy, Mara's voice was a low, steady hum beside her. Breathe through it. The child is coming, but we have time. He has Bradley, Abigail gasped, the words torn from her as the contraction eased. The scent of damp stone and phosphorescent lichen was thick in the deep cave tunnel. He's going to kill him, because of me. He made his choice, Liam said from the tunnel entrance, his voice a gravelly baritone. He didn't turn, his body a rigid silhouette against the faint, watery light filtering from the main cave. The Alpha's vow is law. You are safe. That was the trade. I don't want that trade. The cry was raw, echoing off the close walls. Another pain, sharper this time, lanced through her, and she curled around her belly. Her child, Evan's child, was coming into a world of monsters and bargains. If only she had known the true cost of Evan's obsession, she would have run to the ends of the earth. Myra's hands were surprisingly gentle, checking her pulse, her temperature. The female warrior's eyes, a sharp amber in the gloom, held a strange, fierce softness. The little one is strong, stressed but strong. Your fear is a storm, but he is an anchor. She paused, nostrils flaring. He smells of pack already, of Bradley's claim. The words were a comfort and a fresh wound. Abigail sobbed, the sound swallowed by the distant, eternal rumble of the waterfall. Somewhere out there, under the rising moon, Bradley was walking to his death for them. And here she was, powerless in a hole in the ground. What happened next changed everything. A new sound cut through the water's drone, a swift, padding footfall. Liam tensed, a low growl building in his chest. Myra shifted, placing herself between Abigail and the tunnel mouth. Finn appeared, breathless, a livid bruise on his temple from Evan's blow. His eyes were wild. Scar's back. The hunt is on. Evan's heading for the cliff top with the Alpha and the other rogue. They're preparing the site. The pack mobilizes? Liam asked, his voice tight. Yes, but Scar, he wants the female. Abigail's blood ran cold. Me, why? Finn's gaze darted to her, full of a pained urgency. He didn't say, but he's coming now. Before anyone could move, a new presence filled the tunnel entrance. Larger, silent, and radiating a calm, deadly authority. The scarred man, Grey Wolf, stepped into the dim light. His scars were silver threads on his face, and his eyes, the color of winter sky, settled on Abigail. "Get her up," he said, his voice not loud, but leaving no room for question. "She's in labor," Mara protested, though she moved to help Abigail stand. "I am aware," Scar said. "That is why she comes. The ritual requires the child's birth and the Alpha's sacrifice under the blooded moon. Evan has one. He will soon have the other. He will return for her. This cave is no longer a refuge. It's a trap waiting to be sprung," Liam growled. "The Alpha's vow secured her release from Evan's direct clutches. It did not command us to hide while our Alpha is slaughtered and his claim is desecrated." Scar's gaze never left Abigail. "Bradley claimed you. That claim does not die with him. It passes to the pack. And we do not abandon our own to fate. We fight for them." A new kind of terror, laced with a desperate, fragile hope, sparked in Abigail's chest. "You're going after him." "We are, and you are the key." He stepped closer, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. The scent of pine and cold stone clung to him. Evan's focus is split. The ritual is a delicate thing. He must be in a specific place, at a specific time, with both components. Your pain, your fear, the child's imminent arrival, it will be a beacon to him, a distraction. But it will also be a beacon to us. We can use it. Use me as bait, Abigail whispered. As a compass, Scar corrected. And as a reminder of what he is stealing. Will you stand, Abigail Reed? Or will you hide and let his sacrifice be for nothing? Another contraction seized her, doubling her over. Mara supported her, a solid pillar. As the pain receded, leaving her panting, she saw not the dark cave wall, but Bradley's face as he offered his life. His words, "You are mine to protect." He had given everything. Hiding felt like a betrayal. She straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. Her voice shook, but it was clear. "What do I need to do?" The jungle at night was a symphony of shadows and threat. Every rustle was an enemy, every snap of a twig a potential attack. They moved swiftly, a silent, lethal procession. Scar led, with Finn scouting ahead. Liam and Mara flanked Abigail, half carrying her over the rough terrain when a contraction hit, which was coming faster now. The air was thick with the coppery scent of the blooded moon as it stained the sky a deep, ominous red. It pulsed, a visible heartbeat that seemed to sync with the pains in her abdomen. "The cliff top is ahead," Finn murmured, appearing like a ghost beside a giant fern. "Two rogues, Evan and the mercenary. They have Bradley on the stone altar. He's bound with silver chain." Abigail's heart clenched. Silver, the stories were true. Scar nodded, his profile grim in the red light. "The pack! Circling, waiting for your signal." Scar looked at Abigail. "Now you must let it go, all the fear, the pain. Don't hold it in. The child wants to meet the moon. Let him call." It wasn't a difficult command to follow. The next contraction was the worst yet, a vice of pure, rending pressure. A cry was torn from her lips, raw and echoing through the trees. It was a human sound, full of vulnerability and life. The effect was instantaneous. From the direction of the cliff top, a furious, possessive roar shattered the night Evan. His focus had been broken. "Now!" Scar commanded, and the jungle erupted. Shapes, sleek and powerful, burst from the foliage. Bradley's pack, a river of fur and fury streaming toward the cliff. Snarls and the clash of bodies filled the air. Scar and Liam shifted, their clothes tearing, bones cracking with sickening, rapid snaps. In moments, two massive wolves, one gray, one tawny, stood beside Mara, who remained in human form to stay with Abigail. "Come," Mara urged, pulling Abigail forward. "We must get to the clearing's edge. You must see. You must be seen." They broke through the tree line into a scene from a primal nightmare. The cliff top was a flat expanse of weathered stone, ending in a sheer drop to a raging sea below. The red moon hung, a swollen eye, bathing everything in a hellish glow. In the center, on a crude, flat stone, Bradley lay prone. Glinting silver chains crisscrossed his bare torso, smoking faintly against his skin. He was conscious, his body rigid with agony, but his eyes were open, burning with a defiant gold. Evan stood over him, a long, ritual knife in his hand. He was shirtless, covered in old ritual scars Abigail had never seen. The mercenary rogue, a hulking brute with matted fur still clinging to his arms, was fighting off a pair of Bradley's wolves at the cliff edge. Evan's head snapped toward Abigail as she emerged. His eyes, fully wolf, glowed with crimson madness. You belong here with me. This is our destiny." "It's a lie," Abigail screamed, the pain and rage giving her voice power. "You're a murderer, a thief." Bradley strained against the silver, a guttural sound of effort and pain escaping him. His eyes found hers across the chaos. Run, they seemed to scream. Live, but she was done running. Evan took a step toward her, but Scar, the massive gray wolf, launched himself between them, his jaws snapping at Evan's throat. Evan shifted with a roar, meeting him mid-leap. The two alphas, one bound by silver and oath, the other by madness, clashed in a whirl of teeth and claws. It was chaos, pure, violent chaos. Mara held Abigail back as another contraction hit, this one so intense her knees buckled. "He's coming," Mara breathed, not about Evan, but about the baby. "It's time." "Not here," Abigail begged, watching as Liam joined the fray against the mercenary rogue. "Please, not here." But the moon's pull was inexorable. Her body was no longer her own. She cried out, falling to her hands and knees on the cold stone. The world narrowed to the fire in her core and the two battling wolves. Evan, bleeding from a gash on his shoulder, threw Scar off with a mighty heave. He didn't re-engage. Instead, he turned, his gaze locking on Abigail, writhing in the throes of labor. A terrible, triumphant light filled his eyes. "The hour is now," he bellowed to the mercenary. "Hold them, the key turns." He began to chant guttural words that seemed to warp the very air. The red moonlight seemed to thicken, to coalesce around the stone altar where Bradley lay. The silver chains glowed white-hot, and Bradley arched his back in silent, unbearable agony. The ritual was starting. Evan was drawing power from Bradley's suffering, from the moon, and from the imminent birth. Scar lunged again, but the mercenary rogue intercepted him, taking the brutal impact. Evan raised his ritual knife, not toward Bradley, but toward the moon, then pointed it at Abigail. A wave of oppressive, draining force washed over her. She felt weak, cold. The baby's frantic movements slowed. He was being pulled, his life force being siphoned toward Evan's ritual. "No!" she screamed, a mother's defiance. She clawed at the stone, trying to rise. On the altar, Bradley's body went utterly still. Then, his eyes, glowing with a final, desperate surge of will, found Evan's back. He wasn't looking at the knife or the moon. He was looking at the silver chains. With a sound that was more a thought than a roar, a final, absolute command, Bradley pulled. The silver chains, superheated by the ritual's energy and strained by his ultimate effort, snapped. Evan, sensing the shift in power, spun, but he was too late. Freed from the silver, Bradley's transformation was not the controlled shift of an alpha, but a cataclysmic explosion of rage and pain. Bones shattered and reformed in an instant, fur erupting from skin still raw and smoking. The wolf that rose from the altar was not just large. It was a force of nature, its coat the color of storm clouds, its eyes twin suns of golden fury. Evan's chant died in his throat. His ritual, predicated on a willing, bound sacrifice, was shattered. Bradley lunged. This was not a fight for territory or dominance. This was annihilation. Evan shifted, meeting the attack, but he was off balance, the stolen energy unraveling. They became a blur of violence, rolling across the stone, dangerously close to the cliff edge. The pack and the mercenary rogue froze, the sheer power of the alpha's resurgence holding them in a thrall of awe and terror. Abigail could only watch, panting, as another undeniable urge gripped her. The baby was coming. Now. Mara was at her side, hands ready, voice a steady stream of encouragement drowned by the snarls. With a final, mighty heave, Bradley pinned Evan, his massive jaws closing around the rogue alpha's throat. There was a terrible, crunching silence. Then a thin, piercing cry split the night. Not a snarl, not a roar. A baby's first wail. Abigail fell back, spent, as Mara swiftly wrapped a tiny, squirming body in a piece of soft leather. A son. He was here, under the blooded moon, on the sacred ground, but Evan was not here to claim him. The sounds of battle ceased. The mercenary rogue seeing Evan go limp in Bradley's jaws, let out a howl of despair and threw himself over the cliff rather than face the pack's justice. Bradley released Evan's lifeless form. He shifted back to human form in a cascade of fading energy, collapsing to his knees beside his enemy's body. He was a ruin, covered in burns, deep gashes, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. But he was alive. His head lifted, his golden eyes, dim but unwavering, seeking and finding Abigail. Mara placed the crying infant in Abigail's arms. She looked from her son's red, furious face to the man who had died for him and then clawed his way back from the brink. It was over. Evan was dead. Her son was safe. Bradley was. Bradley tried to stand to go to her, but his legs gave out. Scar was there in human form, catching him, lowering him gently to the stone. The pack gathered around their alpha, a protective, mourning circle. Abigail, holding her son, knew a truth that chilled the last embers of her relief. The ritual had been interrupted, not completed. But the conditions had been met. A child of rogue blood, born on the sacred island under the blooded moon. And the power that had been stirred, the ancient magic Evan had sought to claim, did not simply vanish. It had to go somewhere. As she looked at her son's quieting face, she saw it. Just for a flicker in the depths of his newborn, slate-blue eyes, a faint, shimmering echo of the bloody moon. And on the stone, as Bradley finally lost his fight with consciousness, the same faint, red light traced the path of his deepest wounds before fading into his skin. The magic had not been claimed. It had been inherited. And in the sudden, ringing silence, Abigail understood the true cliffhanger. What had they just unleashed? The silence after the storm was absolute, and more terrifying than any scream. Abigail clutched her newborn son to her chest, his faint, mewling cries the only sound in a world gone still. Her body trembled with exhaustion and shock, but her eyes were locked on Bradley. He stood over Evan's lifeless form, his massive, furred shoulders heaving. The red glow from the interrupted ritual hadn't faded. It pulsed within the deep gashes on his side, and when he turned his great head toward her, the same eerie light flickered in his wolfen eyes. What happened next would change everything. A low, pained whine escaped him. The glow in his wounds flared, and the raw flesh began to knit itself together before her eyes, not with the slow creep of normal healing, but with a visible, unnatural speed. The silver burns on his wrists, however, remained livid and angry. "Bradley!" Her voice was a cracked whisper. The giant wolf flinched at the sound. The glow in his eyes dimmed, receding like a tide, leaving behind the familiar storm cloud gray. The transformation back to his human form was not the violent shudder of before, but a slow, agonized melting. Fur receded, bones realigned with sickening pops, and he collapsed onto his knees, naked and gasping, one hand pressed to his now closed but still raw side. Scar was at his side in an instant, a blanket from a pack member's satchel in his hands. He draped it over Bradley's shoulders. "Alpha!" Bradley's gaze never left Abigail. "The child—" "He's here," she said, tears finally breaking free. "He's here." Scar's eyes, however, were scanning the cliff top. The body of the mercenary rogue lay where he had fallen on his own knife. The blooded moon still hung, fat and crimson, in the sky, but its oppressive weight seemed to have lifted. "The energy did not dissipate," Scar stated, his voice grim. "It transferred, I saw it, into the Alpha and into the pup." Bradley struggled to his feet, shrugging off Scar's support. He took 2 shaky steps toward Abigail. Every pack member watched, a ring of silent, wary guardians. He sank down beside her, his movements careful, as if she and the baby were made of glass. He didn't reach for the child. He just looked, his expression a war of awe and deep, unsettling fear. "Let me see him," Bradley said, his voice rough. Abigail, with a trust that felt as innate as breathing, shifted the swaddled bundle. The baby had quieted, his eyes closed. But as the moonlight touched his face, his eyelids fluttered open. For a fleeting second, a faint, red-gold light shimmered within the deep blue of his irises, like an ember in a pool of water. Then it was gone. Bradley recoiled as if struck. A collective breath hissed through the pack. "The ritual's intent," Scar murmured. "To channel the moon's power through blood and sacrifice. It was completed, but not as the rogue intended. The vessel was not Evan. It was you. And him. What does that mean?" Abigail demanded, holding her son tighter. "Is he in danger? Is he wrong?" "He is mine," Bradley growled, the sound still layered with a wolf's resonance. "And he is yours. That is what matters. The power is a part of him now, a part of us." He looked at his own hands, where the silver burns stood out like brands. They, too, held a faint, persistent glow. "We will learn its nature. We will control it." The sound of the sea crashing against the rocks far below filled the tense silence. Then, from the tree line, Finn emerged, supporting a limping Nina. Her arm was in a sling made of vines, her face bruised, but her eyes were clear and fierce. She took in the scene, Evan's body, the subdued pack, Abigail with the child, Bradley wounded but alive, and gave a sharp, satisfied nod. "The island is clear," Nina reported, her voice tired but strong. "No other intruders. The sickness is gone." Her gaze fell on the baby, and her stern expression softened by a fraction. "We must move," Scar said, his authority rising to fill the space while Bradley was weakened. "This place is exposed. The cave is compromised. We go to the heart." Bradley nodded, his strength clearly waning. "To the heart, protect them." The pack moved with efficient grace. Liam and Mara helped Abigail to her feet, their hands surprisingly gentle. Another pack member, a woman with dark, braided hair, brought a sling made of soft, woven material and helped secure the baby against Abigail's chest. Bradley tried to stand on his own, but stumbled, the adrenaline finally deserting him. Scar and Finn moved in, taking his weight over their shoulders. The journey was a blur of shadow and leaf for Abigail. They did not return to the waterfall cave, but moved deeper into the island's interior, along paths so hidden they seemed to appear only as the pack stepped onto them. The air grew warmer, thicker with the scent of earth and blooming night flowers. The sounds of the jungle were different here, softer, more resonant. They arrived at a vast, hidden grove. A great, ancient tree stood at its center, its roots forming a natural amphitheater. Soft moss covered the ground, and luminous fungi clung to the trunks, providing a gentle, blue-green light. This was the heart, the pack's true den. Abigail was settled on a bed of furs and moss near the great tree's base. The baby began to root, and with Mara's quiet guidance, she nursed him, the primal act bringing a wave of calm amidst the chaos. Bradley was laid beside her, his breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of healing sleep. The pack moved around them, setting up a perimeter, building a small, contained fire, their movements hushed. Scar sat nearby, cleaning a blade. He watched the sleeping Alpha, then Abigail. "He invoked the oldest law," Scar said, not looking at her. "His life for yours, a trade. He believed it would bind Evan to honor it. It did. But it also bound the pack to him. We could not attack while the bargain stood. But his vow was for your life. It said nothing about his own." A grim smile touched his scarred lips. "We interpreted the terms liberally." "You came for him," Abigail whispered. "He is our Alpha, and you are his," Scar stated, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. "The rogue's ritual magic is wild, unpredictable. It is not pack magic. It is something stolen and perverted. Now it lives in your bloodline." "What will it do?" she asked, fear a cold stone in her stomach. "We do not know," he admitted. It may be nothing, a spark that fades, or it may be a key or a curse. The blooded moon's power is for transformation, for claiming. Evan sought to claim a legacy that was not his. Instead, he gave it to his enemy and his own son. He finally looked at her. The child is of two worlds, Abigail, human and wolf, and now touched by a third. He will need guidance, strong guidance. Days blurred into a fragile routine. Bradley healed with preternatural speed, the glowing wounds fading to silver-scarred tissue. The strange energy within him seemed to settle, a dormant heat beneath his skin. He was quiet, more introspective, his gaze often lingering on Abigail and the child with a ferocious, possessive tenderness that no longer frightened her. It anchored her. They named the child Cale. 1 week after the cliff top, under the light of a normal, silver moon, Bradley found Abigail by the small spring that bubbled in the heart of the grove. She was bathing Cale, who waved tiny fists in the air, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "He is strong," Bradley said, his voice a low rumble. "He is," she agreed, smiling softly. She looked up at him. "What happens now, Bradley, to us?" He knelt beside her, the water rippling around his knees. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a tangible warmth. "The outside world believes you are dead. The shipwreck was thorough. Evan saw to that." A shiver went through her, not of fear, but of finality. The life she'd known, the one of quiet dread with Evan, of sterile apartments and lonely days, was truly gone. She felt no grief for it. "This is your world," she said, gesturing to the grove, the pack moving in the shadows. "I don't know its rules." "The only rule that matters is here," he said, placing a hand over his heart. Then, hesitantly, he reached out and traced the back of his finger down Cale's cheek. The baby turned his head toward the touch. "I claimed you that first night on the beach. I claimed him the moment I sensed his life within you. But a claim is not a choice." His storm-gray eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "You must choose, Abigail, this life. This pack, me, it is wild and it is dangerous and it will never be simple. You can choose to stay, as my mate, as the mother of our pack's heir. Or, when the supply boat comes in 2 months' time, a boat only my pack knows of, you can choose to leave. I will ensure you and Cale have everything you need. You will be safe, I swear this." The offer hung in the air, vast and terrifying. If only she had known, that day on the doomed ship, that it was carrying her not to her death, but to her life. She looked at her son, his eyes now a clear, deep blue with no trace of red. She looked at the man who had broken silver chains for her, who had traded his life for hers, whose very soul was tied to this wild, beautiful place. She thought of the pack, of Scar's steadfast loyalty, Finn's earnestness, Mara's quiet strength. They were her family now. She had already chosen. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice clear and strong. "My place is here, with you, with our pack." The breath Bradley released was one of profound relief. The tension in his shoulders dissolved. He leaned forward, and for the first time his lips met hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a seal, a promise as deep as the roots of the great tree. It tasted of wildness and belonging. When they parted, Cale let out a small, contented sound. A howl rose from the edge of the grove, long, clear, and questioning. It was Scar's voice. Bradley stood, pulling Abigail to her feet with him, the baby nestled between them. He threw back his head and answered, his own howl rolling through the night, powerful and sure, declaring his strength, his mate, his heir. One by one, the pack joined in, Finn, Nina, Liam, Mara, all the others, their voices weaving a tapestry of sound that shook the leaves and echoed to the stars. It was a song of survival, of loyalty, of a new beginning born from blood and moonlight. Abigail listened, her heart swelling with a feeling she had no name for. It was Pack. It was home. The ceremony was simple, as all true things are. Under the next full moon in the heart of the grove, Bradley stood before his pack, Abigail at his side, Cale in her arms. Scar spoke the old words, binding her to the pack, to the territory, to the alpha. Bradley marked the bond not with a bite, but by pressing his silver-scarred wrist to her lips, letting her taste the salt of his skin and the faint, lingering magic of the blooded moon. It was a taste of power, of sacrifice, of a bond forged in fire. Time passed. Cale grew, a happy, robust child with a laugh that echoed through the grove. The red glow manifested only rarely, a flicker in his eyes when he was deeply upset, a faint warmth from his skin when he slept. Bradley taught him control, as Scar had said he would, with a patience that surprised everyone. The magic, they learned, was not a curse, but an inheritance, a heightened connection to the lunar cycle, a strength that would one day far surpass even Bradley's. Abigail learned the rhythms of the island. She learned to track, to forage, to understand the pack's silent language. She was not a werewolf, but she was the alpha's mate, and she carried the pack's future in her arms. That commanded respect. She found a strength in herself she never knew she possessed. The strength of a protector, of a mother, of a cornerstone. One evening, 2 years after the cliff top, she stood with Bradley on a high ridge overlooking the moonlit sea. The island sprawled beneath them, vibrant and alive. Cale slept safely in the grove, watched over by Mara. "Do you ever miss it?" Bradley asked quietly. "The world out there." She leaned into his side, his arms solid around her. "That world had supermarkets and electricity," she said, "but it had no heart. It had no truth." She looked up at him, at the man who was her destiny, washed ashore by a storm of betrayal. "This is my world, all of it." He kissed her hair, and together they watched the moon's path on the water, a silver road leading to an horizon they no longer needed to cross. The past was a shipwreck. The future was a howl in the dark, a child's laugh in a sun-dappled grove, a bond unbreakable as stone. On the remote island, the pack thrived. The alpha was whole. His mate was home. Their heir, touched by a crimson moon, slept dreaming of the wild, and the wild dreamed of him. The story of the expectant mother and the alpha shifter was over. But their legend, under the watchful eye of the moon, had just begun.